Agreed. So thanks, I'm Dan Winter. The core of this conversation today is the nature, the electrical nature of the electric field that causes life, or what is a bioactive electric field. That's what we're going to be describing. So that is our focus, to understand what is the electric field that causes life. The web article, which is a review of today's conversation, has all the references and links, is goldenmean.info/biofield. So that's the web article. It has almost all the pictures. That's the focus of this conversation. And in it, we're going to describe how we've made the electric field and the magnetic field that appears to dramatically affect life. Yeah, so that's the focus here. And in summary, that field is fractal. Okay, we begin. So, bioactive field types, a review. What kinds of bioactive fields do we know of? Yesterday we were speaking about this new book, Seeds of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty. There are other similar books, but it's a nice summary because it presents widespread evidence that the effect of taking your seeds to places like Stonehenge was a dramatically measurable effect on the growth of those seeds. So that's useful in my view because it saves us the trouble of proving it. And again, just so that we have the screen image, here's some of the images from that book, which was discussed by several of the speakers. And we mentioned yesterday that we felt the beauty of the book was evidence that indeed the electric field of Stonehenge and similar structures is bioactive. The limitation of the book is it says, oh, you need to go to find a Stonehenge to trigger your seeds. That's a problem. And so let me be clear. I feel very strongly that the field effect which triggers life and seed growth is electric. Hello. In other words, people who say, well, it's other dimensional and da-da-da, and it's other than physics, and it's other realities, and all this crap, you know, there's one place for those kind of people. It's the same place that physicists who think that the gravitational field is somehow separate from the electromagnetic field. The term for that state of mind is called schizophrenia, and there are hospitals for those kinds of people. Okay? That's my humble opinion, just so you understand. Now, on the other hand, it is true, and you see the reason that schizophrenia causes disease is because then you think that life force is somehow separate from the 6 transformers next to your bed that's killing you when you sleep. That's the disease because, oh, my life force is separate than my electric field, so I don't have to worry about the transformers next to my bed that are killing me. So we need to avoid that schizophrenia. Now, on the other hand, it is true that there are subcomponents of the electric field that cause life that are faster than light. So although you can pick up a gravity field with a 25-cent capacitor, as Hodowanik and Ramsey did, we know that that gravity field, as picked up with a 25-cent capacitor, does have components that move faster than light, and that's measurable. And I have strongly predicted to describe my unified field theory that the phase velocities faster than the speed of light, which we will eventually measure more accurately, will be at golden ratio multiples times the speed of light. At any rate, so this phenomena that we talked about, phase conjugation, is triggering these phase velocities that are faster than light for the reasons we described yesterday. And here's the picture. That when these waves converge in this symmetry, electrically, magnetically, optically, it triggers life and growth and self-organization and gravity because the adding and multiplying of the wave speeds by golden ratio allows this kind of electric field to participate with waves that are moving faster than the speed of light. And that's how gravity and DNA radio work. And it's clear, for example, when you use a capacitor to pick up a gravity wave, as Hodowanik and Ramsey did, we won't dig up the slides right now, that you can see star explosions with a capacitor measuring gravity a long time before the light reaches a telescope. So there's lots of good stuff happening here. And for the people that say, oh, well, it's other dimensional, if by saying that they mean that it's separate than physics, I also categorize that as schizophrenia. When you say other, the only meaning of the term dimension in the physics, now, in the physics of an electrical engineer, I admit to you that I'm an electrical engineer and not really a physicist, although I dabble. But my view as an electrical engineer is that the only meaning for the term, the next dimension, is the next axis of rotation of charge that can be superposed. I say again, my view is The only meaning of the term the next dimension is the next axis of the rotation of charge that can be superposed. So, for example, if you have a tetracube rotating its charge, like we saw last night, that if you then superpose the rotation of charge of a dodecahedron, you'd then for the first time see Golden ratio, and that electric field would be in the next dimension. And that would show up in the frequency signature because you'd see another harmonic in the series, this time Golden ratio instead of octaves for the cube. That's precisely how DNA gets to the next dimension, because the DNA, remember, this is review now, the DNA is a dodecahedron that's been stepped or ratcheted down a helix slinky, and so the dodecahedron is the fourth rotation of charge. The slinky helix thread that is DNA is the fifth, so there's 5 spins inside, and then if you take that thread and you braid the braid on the braid recursively, string to rope to fat rope, you then embed the next axes of charge rotating, and the 7th superposed spin, we showed the pictures yesterday of the braiding of DNA as the plot thickens, as it were, that the DNA pilastrates, self-re-enters, becomes almost toroidal, and you have 7 axes of rotation, not strands, 7 axes of rotation, superposed on the 5 within, so 5 spins inside, 7 spins outside. That should sound familiar, the anu from yesterday. And that's called ensoulment. Getting a soul is when that tornado down the center actually penetrates coherently through the speed of light. And if you can sustain that with enough bliss, you will take something through death. And that is an electric field as plasma, and it's very measurable. So when the New Age woo-woo say, well, do you have 12 strands in your DNA yet? I think the biophysics professors should laugh, because it's only funny. But in fact, the biophysics is that the 7th recursive braid on the 5 axes of rotation does mean that your DNA, if you spectrum analyze its electric field, it's RF, and it's infrared, and it's microwave, you will see in the harmonic series how phase coherent your DNA. And that was, for example, what was called the boson 7 frequency signature of those who could time travel at Montauk, and that was called the microchloridians in the blood in the Star Wars movie of Anakin Skywalker. It is the nature of the blood which indicates ensoulment, because that's where the phase lock to the higher frequency and phase velocities of light, etc., etc. Okay, that was kind of just background. Most of you know sort of my philosophy about these things because I've been teaching this for 20 years, frankly. Okay. I'm humble about this? Well, maybe. But I am strongly opinionated, I admit it. But I think, see, Jesus and Einstein were right. It's a unified field. And these people who give you this crap about that's not physics, etheric force is not a physical force, that's crap. They're causing you to catch schizophrenia, and that's a disease. So avoid the disease by doing the unified field thinking that Christ and Einstein were after. Good. Okay. So we know that Stonehenge was a seed growth trigger. It's measurable. And I am saying to you at this moment that that trigger of the growth of the seed is an electric field, and we electricians need to know what it is if we're going to teach life, and that's why I'm here. Okay, so bioactive field types. Type number 1. Let's see, I'm using the black one. Is that right, Roger?
Try the red one.
Okay. Bioactive field types. A, Stonehenge, which is to say dolmen, which is to say a magnetic and dielectric conjugator. We're going to talk about what Stonehenge was made of, why the piezoelectric and paramagnetic qualities of those stones and the trace mineral in those stones would idealize as phase conjugate dielectric, and we're going to talk about how you measure the electric field at the center of Stonehenge to predict which Stonehenge will germinate a seed and which won't. It's simple physics. It's not a mystery. It's not magic. It's beautiful physics. Next example of a bioactive electric field. Shakespeare's play Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay, why am I telling you that story? So Shakespeare wrote The Psychology of Alchemy. We're going to play with that story for just a moment because it makes the story fun. The story should be fun. It's all right. So everyone knows that Shakespeare was writing The Psychology of Alchemy, which is precisely how soul groups fuse. So the fusion of the plasma of people by a sequence of emotions is called alchemy. Now, remember, Kelly, who was John Dee's assistant, was down grinding up the Kaaba, the sacred meteoritic stone of the Muslims. And the Kaaba was a meteoritic glass through which was projected, this is the physics of alchemy, the real physics, and I want to credit repeatedly in this part of the conversation Vincent Bridges, vincentbridges.com. You can read about our projects together, goldenmean.info/ophanum, which describes the Calling All Angel projects and the spiritual physics of alchemy, and the films about that. So what we understand is that when the Muslims would not let Kelly, who was John Dee's assistant, John Dee was 007, when Kelly could no longer grind it, because about 50% of the sacred Kaaba of the Muslims had already been ground up to make the projective powder, which is the physics of alchemy, otherwise known as the Philosopher's Stone. So, hint here, another bioactive electric field. The red's not working so good, so let's go back. Okay. Another bioactive electric field would be the Philosopher's Stone, which we now know in many cases was a meteoritic glass through which had been propagated a PGM, platinum group metal, palladium, platinum, or gold, which we know is phase conjugate dielectrically, and we understand why. The tricky physics is how do you vaporize that through the glass? Hello, meteorites know how, do you? So they were grinding up this Kaaba. You visualize 1 million Muslims rotating around the Kaaba. I call that a useful example of a bioactive electric field, and we are here to discuss the physics. I might be stuck with the red, Roger. Here, look, maybe here with the blue. Oh, we'll try it. So the physics was that when the platinum group metal is vaporized through the meteoritic glass, it triggers a charged radiance that structures the glass to be a radically phase conjugating dielectric, which is the radiating electric field, very fractal, which in the right implosive conditions, you put a bit of that ground up glass with the correct phase conjugate PGM in it, in a wax about the size of a rice pellet, and you put it in mercury, heat it to red hot, and leave it for a day or two, and you come back and you have gold. That's a short review of what Kelly was doing that got Queen Elizabeth so jealous that John Dee had to write a letter to her signed, "For your eyes only," and this was the English symbol for your eyeglasses, and later was misinterpreted as 007. And that's John Dee. So, and again, this is Vincent's story, and the young Will story he's going to be selling to Hollywood. I feel it's more educational than Da Vinci Code, as well as more fun and better physics. At any rate, so Kelly moves back up to Prague for a reason. In Prague, the geometry of the town, you remember, is a rose. And the shape of that rose is Bohemia. Remember Bohem? Bo means the bloodline of Enki is the short version of the Bohemite, Bucharest, Baal, Beelzebub. And this is the geometry of that city. It's actually more than a city. This is the region Bohem. And that's the bloodline of Akhun, basically. And this is a meteoritic caldera, emphasis meteorite. And in the rivers around there was the mineral quality. But the other thing you need to know is that to do the real alchemy, you need, which is how you make a bioactive electric field, you need to place the place where you do your alchemy, where the magnetic lines cross.